unprepared for battle, only 1,400 people. But the situation desperately called for such, and the Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba to support him, and they did. And this is known as Bay'at al-Ridwan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَنزَلَ السَّكِينَةَ عَلَيْهِمْ وَأَثَابَهُمْ فَتْحًا قَرِيبًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with those believers when they have given you the covenant under that tree, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what was in their hearts, and so He descended peace and tranquility upon them and rewarded them with a near victory. At this point, Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu was determined to be alive, and he left Quraysh and came back to the Prophet ﷺ, and Quraysh sent a negotiator to the Prophet ﷺ because they were not willing to allow the Prophet ﷺ to enter Mecca. The negotiator that came was Suhail ibn Amr, and he came and he spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, and they spoke and they spoke and they spoke, and they finally came to an agreement. They came to some terms. But first, before the terms, Prophet ﷺ asked Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu to write Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Ali ibn Abi Talib was Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And so Suhail told the Prophet ﷺ, we know Allah, but we don't know Ar-Rahman, we don't know Ar-Rahim. So write Bismika Allahum. So the Prophet ﷺ agreed. And we see something critical here. The Prophet ﷺ was willing to compromise if it was not against core principles. So the Prophet ﷺ was still invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the detail of Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, these are further emphases on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's not like the Prophet ﷺ compromised by making shirk and putting names of some of the other gods that Quraysh worshipped in this covenant. So it's important that we see in the actions of the Prophet ﷺ firmness in doing what is right, but at the same time leniency in items that do not go against the core values and the core beliefs. The next, the Prophet ﷺ told Ali ibn Abi Talib to write, this is what Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Suhail ibn Amr have agreed to. And so again, Suhail stopped him and he said, if I knew you were the Prophet of Allah, I wouldn't be opposing you right now. If I believed you were the Prophet of Allah, I wouldn't be opposing you right now. So right from, this is what was agreed upon between Muhammad ibn Abdullah and Suhail ibn Amr. So again, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, I am the Prophet of Allah, even if you disbelieve in that. But in terms of the treaty, the Prophet ﷺ agreed to write, this is between what was agreed upon between Muhammad ibn Abdullah and Suhail ibn Amr. So again, we see the Prophet ﷺ's willingness to compromise. He didn't write anything falsely, factually incorrect or anything false, and he was willing to reach compromise as long as it didn't compromise core beliefs or core values.